Good afternoon, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Judges. We are now in chapter 20. Chapters 19 and 20 really describes the gory event of what happened at uh, Giva, where a Levite had brought his concubine, and the concubine had been sexually assaulted, and she died. At the end of chapter 19, he cut her up into 12 pieces and sent it out to all the tribes all around the land and called for a meeting. And chapter 20 is that meeting. Now, as we begin this chapter, I need all of us to remember a few things. The first thing is that there was in chapters 17 and 18, that would be uh the idols and Dan. And now we are now in chapters 19 and 20. And this would be the sin of Gibeah. And this would be involving the Benjamites. The Benjamites. Now, what is important now for us to realize is that it was also at a time where there were no kings. It was at a time when people were just doing what they want. And so, chapter 20 is a very important representation of the time when there are no kings. The people took matters into their own hands. And the matter was described in chapter 20 as to take revenge on behalf of the Levite. And so let's begin with chapter 20, verse 1. It begins so. Now, with this, it would be the traditional and then, meaning after chapter 19, all the children of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba. Now, as you can tell, the the expression all the children is not exactly all or every single individual. It's all as an expression. You can think of it as most of them. And then it says from Dan to Beersheba. These are the north to the south. The very north is Dan. The very south is Beersheba. And all the children of Israel, as well as those from the land of Gilead, which is on the eastern side, and the congregation gathered together as one man before the Lord at Mitzpah. Now, this is a traditional occupation from the time where they crossed the Jordan. So let me just briefly explain a few things. Number three, all does not include Benjamin. So this is an expression. Most of them. So now we are talking about all the tribes. That would be the 11 tribes plus the Levites. And so now we have 12. The Benjamites are excluded because the Benjamites at Gibeah is the problem. Now we have this incident happening, and the leaders of all the people, all the tribes of Israel. And so all the tribes means the 12 minus Benjamin presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God. Just look at this. We're talking about 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. Now, if you recall, when they came out of Egypt and they did a census, a head count in Numbers chapter 1, there were 600,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword, 20 years and above. Now, right at this time, we see that the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. So everybody is congregated there. And in verse 3, it says, and then, obviously, you can see that now. And then the children of Israel said, tell how this wicked deed happened. So, wicked in this case would be evil, and evil would be the 12 parts of the dead woman. The expression and telling the story begins here. So the Levite, so verse 4 is, and then the Levite, the husband of the woman or the man of the woman who was murdered. And this one says it was murdered. Ratsat. The suggestion here was that the woman was actually murdered, which when we see in the story in chapter 19, she wasn't murdered, right? She was still alive. By the time she came back to the house, the man, the Levite, was not going after her, was about to leave, and then saw the woman at the portals. And he answered and said, my concubine and I went to Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, to spend the night. And the men of Gibeah rose against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. They intended to kill me, but that was not true. They intended to sexually assault him, but instead they ravished my concubine and she died. Now, verse 5, it says, ravish. This word here, this word literally means humbled. This is an English word, ravished. Sexually assaulted, humbled her, afflicted her, made her like nothing in a sexual way. The story continues. So I took hold of my concubine, cut her in pieces, and sent her throughout the territory of the inheritance of Israel because they committed lewdness and outrage in Israel. Now, in verse 6, this word here is this lewdness is actually loose conduct. It's actually, I guess you could call it wicked conduct, right? Sexual perversion. Or wickedness, right? Sexual wickedness. The second word is outrage, senseless, right? That's what the word actually means. It's a disgrace. It's a, it's a folly. Uh, it's senseless. It's got no meaning, right? That would be a way of actually expressing it. Then he says this: look, all of you are children of Israel. Give your advice and counsel here and now. This word, advise and counsel, uh, give your opinion. I think that would be a good word. Opinion. What do you say? And the word counsel here is actually also advise. Your wise words right now. And so this Levite, now that he has called everybody there, so we have noted a few things, right? A few things. One is uh, they wanted to kill me, which is not quite true. Maybe he thought it that way. Uh, and then he says, the woman who was murdered, and this one was killed. She she died not because of anything, but she died because of the, I guess, the environment. Maybe she came back and she was very weak. She died of the atmosphere or the environment, that she wasn't kept warm, but she died. But this is a fact. But it wasn't because the people killed her. His conclusion was that the people killed her and left her uh, on the porch. Verse 8. So, and that would be, and then we've seen this word, and all the people arose as one man. What that means is all the 12 tribes conquered and said the same thing. So it is like one voice. They spoke as one person. That would be the understanding. So none of us will go to his tent, nor will anyone turn back. We have to resolve this. But now, this is the thing which we will do it to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot. What that means is that they will they will actually take turns to fight Gibeah. That is very important because it's not all 400,000. Now you recall at the time of Hezekiah, there was 185,000 surrounding Jerusalem, and that was an incredible number. But with 400,000 of them, that would be a ridiculous way of teaching your brother a lesson. So verse 10 says, we will take 10 men out of 100 throughout the tribes of Israel, 100 out of every 1,000, 1,000 out of every 10,000. All of this is 10%, right? We'll take 10% of the people to make provisions for the soldiers, that when it came to Gibeah in Benjamin, they may repay all the vileness they have done in Israel. Now, in verse 10, the word repay, uh, literally, I guess you can say, uh, to to how should we say this? To act on, okay? To act on the vileness or the the folly, the crime, the wickedness they have done in Israel. So all the men gathered against the city, united together as one man, all 400,000 of them. Now, I need us to also to remember, as I mentioned earlier, they didn't do this when Dan took the idol. Nobody actually made any noise that idolatry is now in the land. We must do something about it. Nobody did. But when this thing happened, which is actually also a vile crime, they acted together in one voice, in one person, that they need to settle this. So now in verse 12, then the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, what is this wickedness that has occurred among you? Now therefore deliver up the men. And 13 says, the wicked men who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove the evil from Israel. So what we can see is this. We can see that they want justice. And there's nothing wrong with that. Wanting justice is good, but they need to be seen to do justice and judge fairly. Now, as this intention was expressed, then we find, but the children of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. So Benjamin was also a children of Israel, but they would not be bothered. Why? Because they are a proud group of people. And as a proud group of people, they also know their ability. Verse 14. Verse 14 then says, instead, I think we could also use the word, and then the children of Benjamin gathered together from their cities to Gibeah. Now, you need to uh, understand in Gibeah, it is their place, their city, and so if they were to do anything, they would have to deal with it themselves. Principally, the tribe has to deal with the sin within the tribe itself. But now you get all the 12 tribes coming to seek justice. And so they decided to gather together at Gibeah and to prepare to go to war against the children of Israel. And from their cities at that time, the children of Benjamin numbered 26,000 men. Now you need to understand these words 26,000 men who drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who numbered 700 select men that they can really fight. But more interestingly, among this were 700 select men who were left handed. Everyone could sling a stone at hair's breadth and not miss. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time explaining this. First of all, it is the children of Benjamin, 26,000 men, to fight against 400,000. And then there was 700 in Gibeah. And among these people of 26,000, then 700 were left-handed, and they can actually sling a stone, and they would hit. Now, this word here in verse 16, it says that they could sling forth a stone to the hair. Now, this is the word, not a hair's breadth, but at a hair strand. So what does that mean? Very, very simply, it literally means that they could hurl a sling and then a stone would hit and it would hit the hair. Now, this is what it's trying to say, that it will be able to hit the hair strand and not miss. This word miss is very interesting. This word miss is hata, sin. That's how we normally translate this word. So when you see this Hebrew word hata, then you need to understand this particular verse, that it is someone who can sling a stone at a hair and not miss, not a hair's breadth. So, and they are what we call sharpshooters of the day. So missing the mark is sin. And that is how the Hebrew word is used. Now in verse 17, it says, And besides Benjamin, the men of Israel numbered 400,000 men who drew the sword. All of these were men of war. This is a ridiculous number comparison. So we have 26,000 men to fight, right? 26,000 men to fight 400,000 men. And out of these 26,000 men, 700 were sharpshooters of the sling. But 26,000 to 400,000 is a ridiculous comparison. Basically, on paper, you find that Benjamin is doomed to be completely destroyed because 400,000 men can overpower them easily. Now, what is strange is that we find the next passage. The next passage says this in verse 18. And then the children of Israel arose and went to the house of God to inquire of God. Now, this word here, the house of God, was the word Bethel. Bet is house, El is God. The tabernacle is in Shiloh. And so it's likely to say the house of God would be where the Ark of the Covenant is located. And so with this, they went there to ask. And they asked, which of us shall go up first to the battle with the children of Benjamin? So this was the question. The question wasn't, shall we go after the Benjamin? The question assumes that they will fight the Benjamites and merely went to ask God which tribe should go and fight first. And so this would be inquiring the Urim and the Thummim. And then when you hear these words, and the Lord said, Judah first. Basically, they are rolling the stones, and the stones fell out and says, Judah is the first, because that was the question. The question wasn't, shall we go after the Benjamin? They assume that the Benjamin, all of them are wrong. They must be punished. Now, what you can see this is God is merely giving an answer. The answer may not be the answer that he is trying to get them to do, but it is to answer a question. And so God is merely answering the question and not trying to tell them that they were wrong. Verse 19. And then the children of Israel rose in the morning and camped against Gibeah, and the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel put themselves in battle array to fight against them at Gibeah. Now, the first group that went up was Judah. We don't know how many people from Judah went, but we read that Judah went. Then the children of Benjamin came out, and on that day cut down to the ground 22,000 men of the Israelites. And the people, that is the men of Israel, encouraged themselves and again formed the battle line in place where they had put themselves on the first day. This was a shock because the number of people in Benjamin weren't that many. They actually had 26,000 and they killed 22,000 men. That's also a ridiculous number because that would be almost the same number as the number of Benjamin. And this was the first day. Verse 23. And then the children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord. Why weep? Because they lost. They thought that when they go out and roll the Urim and Thummim, that God will be with them, and that's not the case. If God did not sanction this and tell them to do it, then they are doing it on their own, and then yeah, I guess God will say, God bless you. You want to fight? Go fight. And ask the counsel of the Lord, saying, shall I again draw near for the battle against the children of my brother Benjamin? And the Urim and Thummim says, go up against him. Because this idea of shall gives us an idea of a yes or no. And so the rolling of the dice of the Urim and Thummim was a yes. Then go, because the question here was, should I go? Now on verse 24, the children of Israel approached the children of Benjamin on the second day. And Benjamin went out against them from Gibeah on the second day and cut down to the ground 18,000 more of the children of Israel. All these drew the sword, because a lot of them using sling was very sharp. So another 18,000 men died, a ridiculous number of people. Verse 26. And then all the children of Israel, that is all the people, all the 12 tribes minus Benjamin, went up and came to the house of the Lord and wept. Why? Because both times they lost terribly. They sat there before the Lord, which is before the tabernacle, and fasted that day until evening. Why fast? Is because they have remorse and regret. They are trying to focus on why did they lose. They offered up burnt offerings, peace offering, whatever they thought could offer up to God, and to seek an answer from God. And now the children of Israel inquired of God. And here tells us why. The Ark of the Covenant was there in those days. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, was standing in those days. What this means is they went to Shiloh, to the Ark of the Covenant, saying, shall I yet again go out in battle against the children of my brother Benjamin, or shall I cease? Now, this here is a bit better because there are two questions: fight or stop. And so with the Urim and Thummim, we find this. And the Lord said, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand. So in this case, as the dice is rolled, there is a little bit more information as to what God would do. Here is the first time God says, I will give you victory. That's what it means. Tomorrow I will give you victory. Verse 29. And then Israel set up men in ambush all around Gibeah. So what you see is that we have Gibeah, and the rest of them are all camped beside Gibeah. So all the men were all surrounding Gibeah. Now we see this instance. And the children of Israel went up against the children of Benjamin on the third day and put themselves in battle array against Gibeah, as at the other times, exactly how they were. So the children of Benjamin went out against the people and were drawn away from the city. They began to strike down and kill some of the people, and as the other times in the highways, one of them which goes up to Bethel and the other to Gibeah, and in the field about 30 men of Israel. And the children of Benjamin said, they are defeated before us, just like before. So what we find is there is a road, right? There is a road, and the road goes to Bethel. The road goes to Bethel. But the children of Israel said, "Let us flee and draw them away from the city to the highways." So all the men of Israel rose from their place and put themselves in battle array in Baal Tamar. Then Israel's men in ambush burst forth from their position in the plain of Gevah. And 10,000 select men from all Israel came against Giv'ah, and the battle was fierce. But the Benjamins did not know that disaster was upon them. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and the children of Israel was destroyed that day. 25,100 Benjamites, and all these drew the sword. So 25,100. So what is the difference? The people that was still around was 900 out of 26,000. Verse 36. And so the children of Benjamin saw that they were defeated. Now, what really happened, just by way of drawing it, we have Giva, and then we have the road to Bethel. And then what happened was these people were lured out. And then while they were being lured out, then you find that there were other people here that came to attack Giva. And so they were spread thin. The men of Israel had given ground to the Benjamins because they relied on the men in ambush whom they set against Giva. And the men in ambush quickly rushed upon Giva. The man in ambush spread out and struck the whole city with the edge of sword. Now, this is a very important expression. Struck the whole city with the edge of the sword means that they came in and they slew. They slew everyone with the edge of the sword. Now the appointed signal between the men of Israel and the men in ambush was that they would make a great cloud of smoke rise up from the city. And that would look something like this. All right. And so the smoke was rising up from the city. As the smoke was rising up, then we find the events are coming together, whereupon the men of Israel would turn in battle. Now, Benjamin had begun to strike. They killed about 30 of the men of Israel, for they said, "Surely they are defeated before us like the previous battles." But when the cloud began to rise from the city in a column of smoke, the Benjamins looked behind them, and there was a whole city going up in smoke to the heaven. And this is what we see right here. And when the men of Israel turned back and the men of Benjamin panicked, for they saw that disaster had come upon them, therefore they turned their backs before the men of Israel in the direction of the wilderness. So what we now do see is that these people ran away to the wilderness. The battle overtook them, and whoever came out of the cities, they destroyed in their midst. Therefore, verse 42, it literally tells us, and then they turned before the men of Israel in the direction of the wilderness. So basically, they are just running away. Right? This is Giva, and this is the road to Bethel. And then they ran away to the wilderness. But the battle overtook them, and whoever came out of the cities, they destroyed in their midst. They surrounded the Benjamites, chased them, easily trampled them down as far as the front of Gibeah toward the east. 18,000 men of Benjamin fell, all these men of valor. Then they turned and fled towards the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. There they cut down 5,000 of them on the highways, making it a total of 23,000. And then they pursued them relentlessly up to Gidom and killed 2,000, 25,000. So all who fell of Benjamin that day were 25,000 men who drew the sword. All these were heroes. Now in verse 47, but the 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness of the rock of Rimmon, stayed there for 4 months. So what we found is that there were 600 of them that ran to the wilderness. And the men of Israel turned back against the children of Benjamin, struck them down with the edge of the sword. Every city, men and beasts, all who were found. They also set fire to the cities they came to. Now, these are very sad situations. They struck them down with the edge of the sword, every city, men, beasts, and all who were found. It means that at the end of the day, 600 men who ran to the wilderness, to the rock of Rimmon, were the only ones who escaped. All this would also mean women and children. And what you can see is this is not fair. The judgment was unjust. They left idolatry aside. They took such a hard stand against the Benjamites. They never actually held a court to decide whether it was necessary or it was true or not. They merely asked God if they should go and fight the Benjamites. And finally, when God says, I'll give them to you, it is not because God wanted them to do, God allowed them to do, but made sure that there were still some Benjamites safe so that they would learn their lessons well. So in chapter 21 would be the remorse of all Israel, that they suddenly realize they have killed their brother. You see, when siblings fight, you don't kill everybody and try to exterminate them. You would scold them, you would penalize them, you would judge them fairly. But in this case, at a time where there were no kings, they just reacted on their own doing. That they thought that was the right thing to do, but it was not the right thing to do. It was the wrong thing to do. To kill so many of the Benjamites was the wrong thing to do. To take the city, yes. To teach them a lesson, yes. To judge them fairly, yes. But none of this were done. And they went out and they almost completely annihilated the tribe of Benjamin. That is how scary chapter 20 is. I hope that you can see that whatever they did was very foolish, never thought through, no wisdom on their whims and fancies, and they thought they could do what they want against their brother and almost wipe them out from the face of the land. And that in itself would have angered God. God gave the land to the 12 tribes. Who gave them the right to change that? And with this, we come to the end of our session today.
Look at verse 35. Verse 35 says 25,100 men, correct or not?
Yes.
Then verse 46 is 25,000.
Yes.
So in total, we would have out of the 26,000.
1,000 men.
The figure 25,100 or 25,100 or 25,000.
It would be 25,100 to be exact, actually.
Okay,
And
then
and this one is merely trying to give us a picture of
Mhm.
of how ridiculous this whole situation is. To
Ah.
then eventually they chase everybody down, and only 600 men were left, not 900.
I
So
see.
we don't have the details of the rest of them. Now, were they killed? Were they running away? Were they all over the place? Were they injured? So we're not told of 400 of them, actually.
So it's just a broad picture only lah.
Yes, it's a broad picture, but these 600 were the ones that they were looking at. Now,
Okay.
maybe what happened was there was a way that some of them were counting. On the first and second day, perhaps on the first and second day, perhaps, well, maybe another 1,100 men had died then. That would be one way of looking at it, because nothing was said on the first and second day. Only the children of Israel died, right? Many of them died. Might be reasonable to see that even the Benjamites, some of them may have died. So maybe the numbers might have fitted in those 2 days, whereas on the third day, 25,000 of them died.
Okay.
Yeah, possible that way. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Yes, they actually overreacted. In fact, they reacted as though they were, well, I guess, uncivilized. Complete overreaction. They never did any judgment properly. And based on one man's word, one tribe were almost completely destroyed. Yes, good observation.